interviewed Victoria Labalme about her upcoming book, Risk Forward. She comes from a theater and performance background in New York City and is a keynote speaker in the Speaker Hall of Fame, as well as a performance coach and a producer. She has an artist's heart and an entrepreneurial mind, and she is definitely somebody you want to get to know. And if you're lucky enough to see this by March 16th, you can buy her book and receive a ton of extra content. The information is in the show notes below. I'll see you on the page. Enjoy the interview. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk. I'm so excited to talk about your upcoming book, Risk Forward. Right when you open the book, in the first few pages, you write, "Some people in life know exactly what they want to achieve. This is the book for the rest of us." Tell me where you started and how you got to be where you are today.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And second, I love that question. So, a number of people, I had a lot of interests and I was interested in the arts of all kinds, performing and writing and dancing and choreography and character work and mime. Yes, mime. And when I was coming out of college and I was doing all these different things, my friends were sort of questioning me, like, how are you going to make a living? And where's all that going? And which one are you going to do? And I didn't know. But I just kept following what excited me, and little by little, my career grew. Um, and along the way, I witnessed 9/11 from my bedroom window, and that changed me. And right after that, I had an opportunity to, a guy had seen me in a comedy club actually, invited me to come and do something for the professional speakers. And I thought, well, if I can help, because 9/11 taught us all, how can I help? What can I do with my talents? Is this what I want to be doing? And so I thought if I can be of service, then I'd be happy to contribute. So I went to a speakers conference, helped them with their storytelling, their stage presence, and that led to more workshops, coaching, and that led to corporate events, and that led to keynotes, and that led to the career that I have today. And so you never know where something's going to take you.
To me, this is unlike any book that I've ever seen or read, whether you're an artist, a business person, entrepreneur, parent. It helps you navigate the unknown.
That's exactly why I wrote it, because I suffered a lot in my life when I was younger. But even as I got into my business career and my arts career, people would always ask, what's your plan? What's your goal? Where do you want to be in 3 years? And I didn't always know. Sometimes I was clear, but sometimes I wasn't. And I felt in those moments that I was wrong for not knowing and that it was something to be ashamed of. Unless you have a clear vision, you're considered subpar. Unless you have a clear goal or a plan, you're considered lost. And that really bothered me. And even as I got higher up in business, I started to learn this secret that not many successful people share, which is that some of the most celebrated creative endeavors and companies didn't start with complete clarity or a detailed plan or a goal. They started with a wisp, this idea, and the person followed it and they figured it out as they went. And so I wanted to talk about that because I wanted other people who didn't know and were in between knowing moments to feel like it was okay. And as I like to say, if we can have the courage to stay in the not knowing until we're coming from within, until we have an inkling of where we want to go, and we come from the inside out, that courage is, in my opinion, the determinant of our success. Because then we come from a true place and we can create something completely original.
So how do you trust that phase of not knowing?
We all know that when we're on a creative project, it evolves into something beyond what we could have thought. And they say, for example, a film even is written 3 times. Once when it's first scribed, like once when you first draft and write it, then when it's shot. Because you say, oh, we can't shoot in LA, we have to shoot in, San Diego, we can't shoot, and this time we have to change it to an interior shot. I mean, everything gets changed when you shoot or you lose an actor or whatever. And then it gets another round when it's edited because scenes get cut. So they say a film is made 3 times, and the same is true with any creative project. You think it's going down this path, and then it changes. And same with life. So I feel like if we can know that that's okay, and know that, like, there's this wonderful quote from E.L. Doctorow, the writer, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, writing a novel is like driving a car in the fog. You can only see the distance of the headlights, but you can make the whole journey that way. Mm. And sometimes we have flashes of where we want it to go, but sometimes we don't. And I'm making the case for that's okay when you don't always know.
So if you were to give somebody advice, like what are the 3 things
if you feel paralyzed in not knowing, if you're not sure what's the next project to work on, where to
Yeah.
go in your project or where to go in your life,
Yeah.
especially now with
Right.
many of us at home and careers changing.
Great. Well, the first thing is what I call embrace the fog. So I've addressed that here, which is to embrace it, to say, actually, this is fertile. This is a fertile period. It's full of promise. There's a section in the book where I talk about this inner current. And I say that in each of us is this inner current that is like an inner line of wisdom. And then I talk about 4 questions to help you find that inner current. And I'll give you one today because it's a really helpful one. And it is, what interests you now? That question is a profound game changer because our pasts can hold us back, not just our failures, but our successes too. So let's say you've written 4 plays about a certain topic and you think, well, I kind of have to stay in that vein. Or you've always been a screenwriter and you actually want to write a novel and you feel like you somehow have to stay true to what you've done before because you're known for it or you feel like that's where you've mastered. What interests you now could be anything from what book do you want to pull off your shelf to you're scrolling Netflix and for whatever reason something comes across and you're curious. I always say that is your hidden genius. So follow what interests you now. And then the next, there's this beautiful page, and I won't give it away in the book, but I call it the clock of calm and the clock of angst. And the clock of angst is when we like compare and despair against what everyone else is doing, and we're behind, and we screwed up, and what were we thinking, and we should have started sooner, and we'll never make it. We don't have what. And then the clock of calm is very different. And so it's really about recognizing that everyone's at their own pace, and you're right on schedule. So I won't give all the clock dials away, but it's avoid the compare and despair and stay in your own process.
I love that. I mean, every time I talk to you, and even when I look at the book, my mind just starts firing. Some people read a book from the beginning to the end. That's kind of how I am sometimes, most of the time. And then some people just like to like flip through it. And with your book, it seems like you can do any of that.
Well, yeah, the book, you're exactly right. The book is written so that you can read it from front to back or pick up any section you want. And so it's written, you can just dive in for 2 pages. Each chapter is super short. Some chapters are 3 pages, some chapters are half a page or 1 page. So it moves very quickly and you can just come in and out at will. I am a highly visual person. I like to learn in different ways, and I thought this book can appeal to people who like to read and people who like to look. And because of my background, like you, coming from the arts and the performing arts, playwriting or performance or screen, I wanted it to have a journey experience. I wanted to take the reader through a journey of experiences. So it's written to be an experience. And each page is different. Each chapter is unique unto itself. So you never know, like a good play or a good movie, you never know what's coming. And you turn the page and it's another experience.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, I mean, there are so many things I love about this book, but one of my favorite things about this book is the stories.
That, bar none, was the hardest part of creating this book. I had so much I wanted to put in. We all have that with a creative project. We want to throw in the kitchen sink and we don't want anything to be left out. And the editing is where the real rubber meets the road. And so for the stories, because I wanted it to be something that would resonate with all types of ages, and like you said at the beginning, entrepreneurs and artists and executives. And I think those 3 populations have a lot to learn from each other. Like artists are like, oh, they're corporate, and corporate's like, oh, they're artists, and entrepreneurs are like, oh, they're corporate. Like everyone judges each other, and we're all humans, and we're all trying to create good work. So I carefully chose a few examples from each of those, and wanted to touch different populations. So they're very thoughtfully placed. And then my own story. And if you look carefully, all of my stories are the stories where I screwed up. Like there's never like, I was great. I'm always like, okay, this was an embarrassing moment. Okay, I screwed that one up. Okay, I kind of lost it there and burst into tears here. Because those are true. And it's in those moments that I found my way. So there were a lot more I would have put in, but we just didn't have space. And I wanted it to be a book that moved quickly. My main thing was for it to be a book that people completed. And you can read the whole book in 90 minutes. What I didn't ever want is someone to say, yeah, I got 3/4 of the way through and I couldn't make it. Like that's the nightmare, right?
Yeah,
So I thought I'd rather it be short.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that you can have another book and tell more stories because I would want to know them. I mean, I was just as you were talking, reflecting on, I've seen you perform in front of thousands and thousands of people. You've worked with huge corporations, Microsoft, Starbucks, right? I was with you at a bar downtown New York as you were practicing your routine with like
Yeah.
pantyhose and all this crazy stuff, and
Right.
everyone's drinking, and then you went out there and killed it. Like,
Thank you.
I've seen you do the whole realm of things, from
Yeah.
the most downtown creative, cutting edge to corporate. And what would be the one thing that you think connects them?
Um, I think that the people who really are succeeding are the people that strive for good work. And that's true in every business. And in my opinion, the top corporate people are the most creative. And in my experience, the top artists are the most disciplined. And that's where they cross over because corporate is disciplined and so are top artists, but we don't think of top artists as disciplined. And same thing with corporate. Top corporate are creative. We don't think of corporate as creative. Like when I'm working with the top C-suite, meaning the CFO, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, chief executive officer of companies like the ones you mentioned, these people are extraordinary in their thinking. It's so out of the box because they wouldn't keep their company on the cutting edge if they were thinking like everyone else. And that's thrilling to be around, and the same thing with the arts. Like people like you, Micheline, you're so disciplined about your writing. You keep it as a practice. Our mutual friend Stephen Pressfield, he's so disciplined. The best artists, they are at it and they treat it like a job. And that's where the crossover connects.
Yeah, there's a trick with that, right? Because you were talking about like, what do you want to be doing now, right? So sometimes you show up and you're working on your book or you're working on your script and you're like, I don't want to be here right now.
Yeah,
This is not fun. This feels like slogging today.
totally.
Through those times.
Yeah, I think for those moments, and there are definitely those moments, it's really about keeping your eye on what this is all about. So there's a question I ask early in the book, which I won't give away here, but it's an overarching question about what really matters for you in your life. And it's a profound question. I've asked it across the planet to hundreds of thousands of people, and it works every time. When you reconnect with your answer to that question, it helps you remember why you're doing what you're doing. Because otherwise we get caught up in, oh, I'm submitting this for this festival or for this award, or, I want to prove to so and so that I'm a really talented artist. And when we reconnect with why we're actually in this all to begin with, it helps pull us forward. Because it's hard. But like if you remember the audience or the reader or the person who's going to hear your words, it's very profound.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I mean, it is, if you're doing it right, there is risk involved. I mean, the title of your book is Risk Forward, right? But
Yeah.
there's also so much play,
Oh, yeah.
and creativity in the book. You know what I mean? It's
Totally.
it's both a book for business and a book for creatives, and it
Totally.
balances that in an amazing way.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's what I started with the vision for that. It's like, how can I hit right down the center of this so that it touches both of those sides? And for me, the book itself was a risk forward. Like, I included these, as you mentioned, I have these little designed figures that are trademarked, and I haven't included them in my work in a long time. And, we all want to be perceived in a certain way. Like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm X or Y. And one of my fears is I won't be taken seriously. Like, oh, I want to show how smart I am. So like I wanted to jam all this business stuff into the book. And my husband was like, I don't think it goes in this book. And you, Micheline, is one of the early readers. I had like all this business stuff in there. And you're like, I don't think this goes in this book. And I was, phooey. So I had to pull it out. And that was a risk for me because I'm known for some of that core content. And it was feeling naked to go out without it and feeling naked to put these little designs in because I thought, oh, will I be taken seriously? Turns out people loved it. You get feedback from people, whether it's an early reading or an early, script trial, like a read through, and that's worth paying attention to.
So, I've known you for a long time, and I remember, you did theater. You were in the Toyota Comedy Festival at the Public Theater in New York, very reputable, amazing audience. And then you start working in the corporate field and doing really well there. And there were times we'd have conversations where you're like, well, what about, you had made some films and you're like, what about my vision as a filmmaker? And how do I do it all? Like, if you're interested in a lot of things,
Right.
you're talented in a lot of things, how do you do it all? How do you trust that? And then I saw you, continue moving forward in faith, taking the next step, so that you're then producing with your husband, Frank Oz, Muppet Guys Talking, a completely amazing film about the Muppets, but also about creative process. How does that happen?
Well, I love that you brought that up, and it does come full circle, I think, in many ways for each of us if we continue following that next step, because it has its own path. Like the path that we think it's going to be is not always the path. And so I did go from the performing arts into like the business world. And then I ended up falling in love with and marrying Frank Oz, who was one of the original Muppet performers. And while I was doing all this business work, I was hanging around Frank and his buddies from the Muppets. And I was thinking, wow, that culture among these guys that Jim Henson instigated, I'm not seeing in the business market. And they have a lot to learn from this. So I kept thinking we should film these guys talking. And then it became Muppet Guys Talking. We got a bunch of cameras together. I co-produced it with Frank, and we had uh, 5 cameras in a loft in 2012. And then over the course of the next 5 years, because Frank was busy and I was busy, we edited it. We didn't know, this is back to not knowing. First off, I'd never made a documentary film. I grew up knowing nothing about the Muppets, so you don't have to know these things to do them. You just have to get the right people around you. And I got these people around me. We made this film. We didn't know if it was going to be a series. We were, if it was going to be, we had no idea. Turned into basically a 65-minute documentary film. It told us what it wanted to be. So I stepped into the not knowing to make it. We stepped into the not knowing to edit it. The material informed us. And when it was done, we submitted it, as you said, to the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin. We got accepted, and boom, it's all over the news. But who would have thought? If you have an idea that you think what I call a wisp of an idea, and you're like, oh, that could be cool, pay attention to that. And if you had that wisp and you put it on the back burner and you're like, oh, I never did it, like I have a line in the book, just because you haven't worked on it in a while doesn't mean you're not meant to do it. It just means you haven't worked on it in a while. So, like when we filmed this in 2012 and it was in the back closet, literally, like it was in the back burner for weeks or months, I thought maybe it's not meant to be. And it wasn't until 5 years later in 2017 that we submitted it, right? So things can take their own time, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's just like start where you are, right? So like
Totally.
for some of the people that are watching the podcast that are involved in the event right out front, we're doing the 28-day writing challenge, and some people might be like, oh, well, I missed day 1.
Yeah, right.
Or I missed day 3. And it's
Right.
like, it doesn't matter. You can start today.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's true in anything, whether you're talking about diet or a new career, or anything you want to change in your life, like no better time than now.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so great.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yes, to check out this and more, go to riskforward.com/book. There's lots of extras there. If you're seeing this before March 16th, do it right now. You won't be disappointed. I've already bought a bunch of books for my friends that are being shipped out, and I'm just so excited to share this with the world. Thank you so much for your generosity and your friendship, and congratulations.
Thank you, Micheline. You're a gem.